It's time for today's episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast, recorded in front of a slightly tipsy studio audience at world-famous Champy's Fried Chicken. We will have the latest on Georgia Bulldogs football, basketball, and recruiting. Watch live and send us your questions on the 11 Alive Sports page on Facebook. Be advised this podcast is off the record and not safe for work. Also, be sure to subscribe to the UGA Sports Live Podcast on iTunes and Google Play.
Fantastic. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the UGA Sports Live Podcast. My name is Rodney DeBulce. I'm joined by recruiting guru, savant, professional extraordinaire, Jake Roos. Coach Donna is not with us today. His wife is still in the hospital. So any prayers you have that you could send their way would be greatly, greatly appreciated. He has sent us some notes, and, of course, we'll touch on those. And, Coach Donna is a
I got to tell you, it's killing him not to be here. I know that.
I was about to say, if there's anybody who wants to be here to expand upon the first days of practices, Coach Donnan, but family first. He and his wife have been married 56 years.
Unbelievable, man.
Think about that. So they are partners in body and mind and soul. So our shout-out to Mrs. Donnan and our prayers to her. And if you have any extra, like I said, just send them their way. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about.
Some actual football.
We have some actual football. We've actually seen practice. We've seen some practice. And, of course, we broke some major news yesterday. We'll talk about that. First and foremost, I want to give a shout-out to all our sponsors, Athens Ford, Aaron Overhead Doors, Europi, Academia Brewing Company, Cable East, and 365 Game Day, which is the Facebook page you're watching this on. Somebody on the board said to be sure to tell everybody how good, these sites are, so we're doing that. And, of course, today is the last day of the 50% promotion at UGASports.com. I had some people complaining yesterday about, I'll just wait. We had the breaking news about Brenton Cox. Like, I'll just wait until the story's out for free on a free site. Well, we put it out for free, idiot. Okay? Just go to the front page of UGASports.com, moron, and you'll see the free story. There's a lot of stuff we don't put behind the paywall, but a lot of our analysis and recruiting updates that Jake does and Trent and those guys, it is behind the paywall, and the message board is behind the paywall. You want to come join that message board. It's 50% off through midnight tonight. The promo code is 50UGA. You can't forget that, 50UGA. So today's the last day, so jump on it. We had a ton of people sign up yesterday. I'm letting you know, don't come to me tomorrow and go, I wanted a 50% off deal. You're not going to get it. So quick shout-out to those folks. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to this page. We're trying to do both. I don't know how the sound quality is there, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. So,
yeah, why not?
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well,
we got a lot to cover.
Yeah, I guess let's take it back. Let's start from the beginning because obviously Friday.
That would make sense. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Obviously Friday was opening day of everything. Had a chance to get out, shoot some video even. That was
another reason to subscribe to
the football god smiled upon us. So it was good to get out there and see it and to get a feel. I think. What is this, 3 practices we've been able to see now? You're starting to get a little bit of a feel for a rotation, where guys are stacking up. Been interesting, I think, to see some of these newcomers out there and how those guys look. Our first chance to see George Pickens out there in his Georgia uniform, Zion Logue as well, Tymon Mitchell, Bill Norton, Trayvon Walker.
Big kids.
Definitely. So it's been, I think it's been not necessarily eye-opening. It's probably what you would expect so far, but
George Pickens opened my eyes.
George Pickens looks good, man. And this was a kid that was really thin coming out of high school. I mean, he was a stick. Now, and I mentioned in one of our earlier episodes that he was going to need to put on some weight. I thought that would be the area that he would need to focus on. He looks like he's all right. I think he's going to be just fine in that regard when it comes to getting out there and getting to mix it up with these guys. George Pickens looks the part. He looks like an NFL receiver.
Yeah, he does. And here's the thing. When I saw Matt Landers, Matt's actually gained some muscle mass, and he's veined out. And a lot of these guys look great. I mean, if you saw Kyrus Jackson over the summer, you're like, wow. The Sinclair's strength and conditioning staff has been fantastic. I mean, they've done wonders with these guys. You saw how great Isaiah Wilson looked. You know? So they've taken some of these bodies and molded them. In other words, the guys are as physically prepared as possible in their body shapes and fitness levels.
Sure.
So they're ready to go. And you see, I thought Matt Landers, I'm like, wow, that guy's really going to step up. He's obviously put the time in the weight room. Will that translate to the field? We don't know. But I was not expecting to see George Pickens come in there and look like he's been in the program 5 years. I mean, this is for a guy who was in high school in May, June. That kid does not look like it. He has put on some muscle mass. He looks fantastic for Georgia. So Zion Logue, I was impressed with him too.
I told you, he's a big old boy now.
I didn't realize.
Now, and I will say too, one of the things that's been impressive, I think, about these guys, and Kirby Smart mentioned it in the press conference the other day, speaking specifically about Trey Hill, is not necessarily the situation where these guys have lost a ton of weight. It's just how they're redistributing it across their body. And so, a guy like Jamari Salyer was not small in high school by any stretch of the imagination, but he looks like an absolute monster now. He is gigantic.
He's got his triceps are like cut now. You're like, offensive linemen aren't supposed to have those, I mean, they got him underneath, but it's the padding there. He doesn't have that padding anymore. He looks like a monster. And, there's some guys that, they're still 300 pounds, but it was, they were at, 25% body fat. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's high percent body fat, but now that's down to, 17, 12, stuff like that. They've dropped a lot, and as you say, it just flipped over. Very impressed with the newcomers so far. But again, as we spoke to James Coley yesterday.
I knew you were going to bring him up.
And James Coley's like, we're
in jerseys,
we're in jerseys, we're in shorts, And again, that's what we say about 7-on-7s. You know, it's like, look, you see guys that they're running routes on air. They're not running against the defense. They're not in pads. They're not throwing guys around. But that's what I'm saying. Let's take it for what it is. Is the square, does it have a check mark in it? In shape for the first day of practice?
Right.
Yes. Okay. We have covered this is my 26th year doing this. I have covered guys who have come back from summer break fat, out of shape, without the ability to make it through practice, suffering from the heat. We've seen guys go home for the summer, come back, because it's not every year that you'd have all these guys come back and work out with the team. So there are some differences.
Yeah, you get home, you get into mama's home cooking, and all of a sudden.
And you work out, but it ain't. It ain't the same.
No, it's not like having Scott Sinclair on you.
No, exactly. I'll put it to you this way: I take my son to the gym occasionally, and when he's there, I'm repping twice as hard, trying to keep up with his little butt. And it's like, well, Dad could do this. I go a lot faster when somebody else is in the room.
Of course.
When you're doing it on your own, you don't. You're like, oh yeah, I'm sweating. No, it's not like a Sinclair workout. But so, point is, these guys, the veterans showed up in great shape. The freshmen have shown up in great shape. We didn't have Kirby saying, well, we need to work on this kid. He needs to lose some weight. This guy needs to gain some.
I mean, there's really
and he said that in the past.
There's really not a guy that if I were just trying to point, even if I were trying to point fingers, there's not a guy that I would necessarily say looks bad out of shape or looks like he's struggling or sucking wind out there. I mean, these guys are they've really risen to that standard in that regard.
So they look good. So let's talk about some of the so that is that check mark is done. The next thing is, okay, how are they lining up? What are the rotations? And I thought one of the biggest or most interesting things was to see Larry Cager, Lawrence Cager, running with the number ones. So because they're going two wide receivers at a time, they have two quarterbacks, and they have a line of receivers on one side, a line of receivers on the other. And the slot guys will go after those guys are done. So all of a sudden, as Tyler Simmons takes off, and here goes Lawrence Cager, number 15, right out there. I'm like, really? Is he your starter already on the outside?
Well, you need that element of experience. I mean, Kirby Smart has mentioned, James Coley talked about it too. That was the big thing that they're lacking going into this season. There's no question about it. I think that it's the one thing everybody's talked about most. So to have a guy who's out there, who has that experience, who has that age, who's made plays in meaningful games, that matters. And to have him be able to lead those guys, I think, is also important.
Yeah. If Jeremiah Holloman were here, I think Larry Cager would be on that second group.
I agree.
But considering, you've got guys with very few catches out there now, and you would think, well, maybe Demetrius Robertson. Well, Demetrius is the number one guy in that slot group. Mm-hmm. So you see Demetrius, and then you see Kyrus Jackson go, and then Willie Erdman, Dominic Blaylock, all those guys in that slot side. So I thought it was interesting of the newcomers. We see Cager right up front, We've seen Cade Mays moving around. He's jumped a few spots, and I think it's a situation where they're still trying to figure out who their best five are.
Yes.
I think that right guard position battle is still raging. That's not been Cleveland's, he doesn't have.
He's not locked in.
Doesn't have an engraved nameplate on that seat. So there's some other guys that want it. And if you see Jamari Sawyer, you're like, how are we going to keep this guy off the field? He showed up a little heavy.
Yeah,
last
he did.
year,
He did.
And
you mentioned Cade. I think that if you're talking about best 5, regardless of position, he's a kid who fits into that. I mean, he's shown you time and time again he can slot in almost anywhere. He's my prediction next year to take over the left tackle spot once Andrew Thomas goes to the NFL draft. I think that he's going to find his way in. I mean, this is a kid who has he's got the whole package when it comes to the offensive line, can play anywhere, and is going to push every guy on that line for their spot.
Yeah, then you got, like I said, between him and Mays being that 6 and 7 guy, you got to be on your toes if you want to be 1 through 5.
Sure.
Now, that's not saying nobody's coming after Andrew Thomas's spot, and Isaiah Wilson's got that locked down. But when you look at your center is a sophomore, and that's Trey Hill. He's a bad man and he's fantastic, but Jamari Sawyer's no slouch. So, it's the offensive line's interesting. The wide receivers are interesting. The running backs, no real surprises there. You see DeAndre Swift first.
Other than much ado was made of the news that Zamir White was cleared. Kirby came out and said that. Now, he told us that in the spring, but, I think a lot of people forgot about that.
Well, but again, he's running third.
Sure.
As you would expect, or the third or fourth sometimes, depending on what the drill is. You're going to have him, DeAndre Swift, Brian Harry, and James Cook, and then Zamir. But to your point, I wanted to bring up, we're watching Zamir White out there, no knee brace on. Not even a wrap. And some guys will put something on there just as a compression
a preventative measure,
just to soften things up. He's not even wearing that. So I expect him to go out there and at least see a brace on. Nothing. Guys running free and clear. So it'll be very interesting to see what he can do. And when we asked James Coley about him, I said, what do you expect out of Zamir? He's like, and he just starts grinning ear to ear. And now James Coley is a happy guy. Don't get me wrong, but he said, look, we all love this kid. We're pulling for him. We're so excited. He's so happy to be out there. He's so thankful. I know it's a feel good story, but it could also be, a Georgia production story.
Oh, I agree.
This could be a guy who
you pulled him back from the brink of career-ending injuries.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who
maybe like a Nick Chubb story.
I really loved. I loved what Coley had to say about him because it's a situation where everybody thinks of these guys and they come in, and he's a 5-star and he's he's entitled or whatever. He said, man, this kid is just grateful to be back on the field and having the opportunity to do what he loves once again. And, for that to be true of the number 1 running back in his class, a guy top 10 in the nation, that's pretty cool to hear, I think.
I don't want to say that, the injuries humbled him because he was like that before he was injured.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We've spoken to him. He was not this arrogant guy that came across. And I also thought that it was interesting that, and this will lead into our Cox thing, Dan Lanning, Georgia's defensive coordinator, we spoke with him yesterday, and he was talking about some of the recruiting things he had done, and they said, they look at a kid on film, can he play? Is he a player? Can he play at the University of Georgia? And then they go and they look into academics. They also do character evaluations.
They talk to the janitors at the school we mentioned.
They go through the Facebook and Twitter and Instagram feeds, and make sure, So they do a character evaluation. Sometimes they miss.
Yeah.
Just like you can miss on a talent evaluation standpoint, you can also miss on a character evaluation standpoint. It happens. It happens in high school. It happens in college. It happens at the NFL level. It's just one of those things out there. I think one of the situations where maybe you did not catch the warning signs was with Brenton Cox. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to stick with the guys who kind of shown out, some surprises. We talked on offense, you see Charlie Warner out there. Eli Wolf looks pretty good. Brett Seether's a little bit smaller than I thought, but he's put on some muscle on the arms.
I mentioned that to Dane Young yesterday that Seether was smaller than I was expecting, really, in terms of height and in terms of weight. Well, that would explain. Remember, Seether was not a household name recruiting tight ends until like the very end of when everyone was scrambling for a tight end. Yeah, he came. He came on in that late November or 1st of December.
Well, and remember, Solomon McKinley was like a last-minute guy. So I'm not against last-minute guys. I'm actually against hey, let's recruit these kids as 14-year-olds. I let some of these guys go through their junior and senior years, see what they can do, don't punish the late bloomers. But he was a little bit smaller than I expected. But John Fitzpatrick looking pretty big. Charlie Warner, saw a video that UGA put out with him actually addressing the team,
Yeah, that was interesting to see.
Charlie Warner actually hyping guys up. He's very quiet, folks. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's not a leader, but
I thought
Charlie's
of him as
one of the most quiet guys out there.
I thought of him as a quiet leader, a guy who gets out there and goes about his business in a certain way. For me to see that, too, I was really struck by that. I was like, oh, my God, Charlie, what is going on,
If Charlie's yelling at you, you stay yelled at.
Yeah, and you, man, listen, if Charlie's yelling at you, you get in line because that dude is scary. I've told this story many times. That's the scariest interview I've ever done in recruiting. He sat there and stared me down for just 3 minutes. He said like maybe 8 words. I'm like trying to get anything out of him, and he's just death staring me.
It's going through your soul.
I was so intimidated.
Intimidating guy. I guess is anybody else on offense we're missing?
Let's see. I don't think so.
Tight ends,
well, Kenny McIntosh was a guy that we talked to James Coley a little bit about. He said, and I thought it was a very good point. It's something that we've mentioned before was coming from the league that he comes from down there at St. Tom, or he's at a University High, South Florida ball. The speed that comes with, he goes, look, some guys, that makes this adjustment a lot easier. And for Kenny, he said, I think that's going to end up being the case. And it certainly looks like that right now.
I'm thinking he was a little bit smaller than I expected, I guess because we knew that he came in as the bigger back. Mm-hmm. So I was expecting, some behemoth, but he's not quite as big as I was expecting.
Sure.
Again, that's not a him issue. And Coley actually said, he's a bigger back. It's more of, I'm thinking all of a sudden of, an offensive lineman as a running back. I had in my head that this kid is, huge, but he's just, when you're talking about a bigger back, you might be talking about a guy that's 6'2", instead of 6'1", or 6'1" instead of 6 foot, or 6 foot instead of 5'11", because a lot of your tailbacks are, the 5'11", 6 foot, 195 pounds instead of 218. So.
Well, and then, if you're talking about looking for that guy, that's who Kendall Milton is.
Exactly.
So you've kind of addressed
Kendall
that.
is that guy. So offense we know is not a whole lot of changes there, not a whole lot moving around. Defensively, there's the secondary is pretty well set. We're not seeing any. We knew that DeAndre Baker's going to be gone, so we see Tyson Campbell repping, in his spot. Eric Stokes on the other side. Tariq Stevenson behind him, DJ Daniel working there some, and at the star position a little bit.
That star position is going to be very interesting.
Yeah. Amir Speed back there, so the secondary looks pretty solid. Like who else was repping at star? You start out with Devod Wilson.
Mark Webb is there working certainly. I think we've seen a little bit. Tyreek McGee is still obviously working there.
He's good at that spot.
Yeah. So I think that it's. Honestly, between those three, I think that's where your guy is coming from. I don't know which of those three is going to end up taking it. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience with Tyreek McGee. He knows what he's doing there. Mark Webb, incredible-looking athlete, a guy who's really come into that defensive back role, and I think can end up making a contribution there. And then Devod Wilson, man, they just don't build DBs like that. That dude is jacked.
Well, remember when he showed up, he was
he was huge when he got here.
So, again, and – I know you don't want to get too caught up in the cosmetics of a team and how a guy looks because, you can look like Tarzan, play like Jane, but when he actually got on the field, when he first got to Georgia, he was killing it, running with the ones, his first few weeks of getting to Georgia. When you have guys that are supposed to look good, okay, you check that box. When they look amazing, when you see a Azeez Ojulari healthy, and he looks bigger than anybody else at that position and can still run, you're like, okay, this guy might be able to do something. And we've seen that. Some of the guys who were physical specimens compared to the other guys who are in great shape, it's like here's somebody who may have just that little extra edge. So if you're in that star role and you're having to take on a running back, I like Devod Wilson's chances.
Oh, no
he's a
doubt.
Big old boy. Tariq McGee, undersized for that position, but he tackles like a maniac.
Yeah.
So again, you can't
Peach
base
County.
it on. You can't go, Peach County, as we say all the time. You can't go by looks, but sometimes looks are an indicator of. Sometimes they do correlate to production.
Sure, no question.
And sometimes they don't. But in this situation, Devod's shown that he can do it.
Like I look good and I work good, so it's it's a good.
Let's not get crazy there. Oh, my God. Just set him up for that. So we need a new recruiting advisor at UGASports.com. We'll do one of those. Do us a favor if you're watching the show on Facebook. Go ahead and share this with all your friends. We'd greatly appreciate that. Sticking on the defensive side, the secondary looks the same. Linebackers, that to me is a little kind of a –
it's an interesting spot. I mean, I think that it's a little up for grabs, and I mean everything you've heard about Nakobe Dean to this point has just been gushing, and that's coming from the coaching staff, which normally isn't so forthcoming with praise. I think that they'll lay it on a guy if he deserves it, but clearly they're impressed with what they've got in that young man. But you look around that group, and again, you're talking about guys who have really worked their bodies into certain shapes. Channing Tindall is gigantic. He's still huge, and I think that he's going to be tough to beat there. But then you got
Monty Rice looks to be in the best shape of his life.
That's right. You got Tate Crowder, who's got tons of experience. Like we said, it's going to be very interesting. And Dan Lanning, I think, pointed to really a very prescient point. I thought yesterday about the defense as a whole. He said, look, we're not going to play 11 guys. He said, we're not looking for 11. He said, we're going to be rotating guys in and out at almost every single spot, and we're going too deep. We're going to try to keep these guys fresh. It's going to give these guys opportunities to get experience. I think that, Georgia's going to I know people are like, well, how do you make all the pieces work? I do think that there's a very good chance that, you end up seeing a lot more of these guys than you may be expecting.
Yeah, it's not going to surprise me to see Tate Crowder and Monty Rice go out and be your starting inside linebackers, and then in that next batch, all of a sudden, Tay's out and, Channing Tindall's in or Quay Walker's in or Nakobe Dean, and then all of a sudden Monty comes out and it flips over, you see a different one. And I'm sure we'll look up at one point and see Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker out there.
Yeah.
You got 5, 6, 7 guys that are going to play those two spots, and they're going to rotate a lot. Outside linebacker, now Georgia's without Brenton Cox. So you have Walter Grant. I don't say he's locked down a spot, but this is a guy who you kind of look at who has the experience right off the bat. Walter on one side. Well, who starts on the other side?
Kind of interesting there because, as you've pointed out, and
the rotations aren't telling us anything.
Right.
Lanning works with the outside linebackers, and
I think it's going to be Jermaine. That's just my early inclination. I think that, we've talked about guys coming in bad weight. Adam Anderson's a lot thinner than I expected that he would be, and in fact looks a little thinner than he was last season. I don't know if that's true, but just optically, on the eye.
Well, it's a situation where he's probably more cut than he was, so he might weigh the same, but like you said, you've shed some and not that he was ever fat.
No.
I mean, so he went from maybe 7% to 5% body fat, something like that. So maybe he's a little more cut, which makes him look maybe just a hair optically skinnier, but he's the same weight. But he is not put on a ton.
No.
He's not TJ Stripling, but he's not he hasn't exactly put on the mass yet,
Absolutely. And you've got to I think there's a degree there's a degree of balance though with Adam, because one of the best thing about his game is the speed that he brings off the edge. He's a guy who gets in there, he's got that great bend about him and can really kind of get around the edge very quickly. You got to balance out, that size versus losing that speed. And, I think Adam will make an impact this year. I think he'll be fine.
Well, he's still the fastest guy they got.
Like I said, I think that you got to be watching out for Jermaine. I think that Jermaine's got a lot of experience. Dan Lanning spoke very highly of him, said, he was a guy when I was at Memphis that I had a chance to see in the JUCO ranks. Said, man, I'd love to be able to recruit this guy. Now I can. And obviously it paid off pretty big dividends for him.
So you got him on the outside. Then, of course, we're hearing – nothing but great things about Nolan Smith.
Hammerhead.
Yeah, they named him Hammerhead. It's short week. Dan Lanning says he hit so hard we're calling him Hammerhead now. You have your offensive lineman saying he's one of the toughest guys to block. To me, we're talking about maybe who the starters are against Vanderbilt, but I think it's not too long before you see Nolan Smith out there a lot. Of course, Azeez Ojulari's coming off that great Sugar Bowl game. He has put on a lot of muscle. We know how talented he is.
Told you, he looks like Lorenzo.
Yeah, I mean – in other words, that outside linebacker group is absolute, and we're bypassing Robert Beal, one of the highest ranked guys in that room, and nothing to sneeze at there. And Beal's, and again, if we're going by the rotations, he's one of the first guys out there because he knows what to do. So you see, it's like Walter Grant goes, then Robert Beal goes, then Jermaine, then Nolan, then Adam Anderson. Again, I don't know what from the wide receivers, you can kind of say who's running 1 and 2 and 3. we're not really getting that with outside linebackers.
No, and I don't know that you will, and I don't know that it won't just be by committee. I think that it, like Lanning said, I think that they realize they've got a lot of talent at that spot. As we mentioned, and we'll talk about here in this next segment, Brenton Cox and that whole situation. But
and the defensive line looks very deep. We know the defensive line was an issue at times for Georgia last year, but Jordan Davis is still gigantic. Tyler Clark looks to be moving well. David Marshall is back from that Liz Frank injury, so you got those three with experience. Julian Rochester was cleared. Apparently, he's cleared to practice.
Yeah.
I mean, he's cleared for contact, so everybody's back there. Then you got the newcomers. Zion Logue, who's huge.
Yeah, he's massive.
Trevon Walker he was always in great shape, but Dan Lanning talked about what a great athlete he is, from his basketball experience.
Bill Norton's a guy who I've heard a lot of I've heard a lot of praise for him from Trey Scott. The last two practices we've been out there, he's been good. Good, Bill. You're doing so. He's he's encouraging that kid.
So again, we don't know how that's going to play out. To me right now, it's going to be get Jordan Davis up there, Tyler Clark on one side, maybe David Marshall on the other.
Brett Oglesby says, "Don't forget about Malik Herring." That's a very good point.
I put in my last 3-2-1. I mentioned that was one of the guys who was some of the offensive players are just saying, hey, this guy has turned it around. He is not just they turn it around. That almost sounds like he's going the wrong direction. But that is a guy who has really stepped up in the offseason. It's Malik Herring. So, again, we're not sure what there's a lot more fluctuation on the defense, a lot more personnel packages that'll be your substitute in and out. So we don't know. Again, and we're not really caught up on the stars. We're just trying to give you a review of what we've seen over 3 days.
Please take into account also that we get to watch about 8 minutes on average. So this is some very limited viewing we're getting.
It is very limited viewing. But if you actually would like a little more service, from what we're giving you, we're not giving you a ton of information because we don't know that much. Swing out by Athens Ford. Those folks will take care of you. You will get more than 9 minutes of attention, I guarantee it. Right now they have some fantastic deals. These are good through September 2nd, so these are the August deals. Right now you can get a 2019 Ford Expedition, okay, the big one, the Expedition. If you got a house full of kids, team mom, team dad, you do a lot of traveling, you're going to a lot of Georgia's away games, you want to go in style, you can get the Ford Expedition, the big one. $16,000 off or 0% financing for qualified buyers for 60 months. $16,000 off. So think about that. If you want a 2019 Ford Mustang, they have them right now for $23,085. A 2019 Ford Mustang for a hair over $23,000. Or you can get 0% financing for 72 months. I say I don't have $23,000, so if I were getting one, I'd have to do the 72 months deal. Or like, hey,
that doesn't make me feel good.
You'll have 144 months.
Yeah, right.
But again, $23,000. You just can't beat that. The 2019 Ford Escape, if you want to go small and super fuel efficient, you can get one of those now for under $18,000. You get a brand new 2019 Ford Escape for $17,675. Or if you're like me and want to finance it, 0% for 60 months. So you just really can't can't beat that. And last one but not least, they have some other deals, but I'm going to tell you about the Ford Explorer, which is what I drive. You can get a 2019 now XLT 202 for $9,000 off or 0% financing for 72 months. 6 years. 6 years to pay that off, 0% financing. That is going to be a monthly payment that is chump change for a brand new 2019 Ford Explorer. So you can't beat it. All right, I guess we need to dive into the news we broke yesterday.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions, and we definitely will get to as many of those as we can, but obviously a lot of people asking.
We're not going to ask your question unless you share the podcast. No.
A lot of people asking, though, about Brenton Cox. Obviously, like you said, we broke that news yesterday. Cox dismissed from the team, now in the transfer portal. Just something that caught a lot of people off guard. I think even caught Dan Lanning off guard when you ask him that question there in the press conference. But
I was waiting for him to address it. Okay, I thought it might come up. Hey, a former 5-star is no longer on the team.
You think they would just volunteer that?
Yeah, I think you would, because you know that we're going to go out there in the afternoon
and not see him.
So it might as well come out and own the narrative. Don't let us break the story. Come out and say, hey, as an announcement, this guy is no longer part of the team. Now, the only reason I think they didn't do that because usually that's something Kirby does.
Sure.
And so Dan
and Lanning, he did.
Yeah.
He bounced it to Kirby. He said, "Look, this is
so I asked
question for him."
Yeah, he
Rightfully so,
deferred, which is fine, and that's the way Kirby wants to do it. My only other concern is, maybe they're waiting for Brenton to come back hat in hand and apologize.
That's possible as well.
But what did he do? He went and put himself in the transfer portal. But as of Monday, when we broke the story, we knew it. He's been dismissed from the football team. He is not a part of it. He was not at practice. He's in the transfer portal. From what I understand, this is it's permanent. But we've seen these things play out in the past where a guy will decide to transfer and then change his mind.
Let me ask you, do you think that that's what's going to happen in this situation?
I do not.
I do not either.
I do not. I'm just saying that
it's possible.
Why it wasn't announced, hey, he's no longer here. So you get to announce it. You get to release the news on your terms. And I don't say frame it because that sounds like you're lying about it, but you say he's no longer, don't have 24 hours, 48 hours of speculation.
Sure.
Because now all the speculation is, well, Kirby can't do this. It was another drug arrest. In absence of hard facts, false facts will enter the situation.
Of course.
So they had a chance. Hey, here's the situation. So
let me ask you this: were you surprised?
No.
Why?
This is why I go back. And again, I'm not going to. The kid could be on the team tomorrow, and I don't want to say bad things about him.
Sure.
But Brenton has always seemed to have an anger issue. Or not just anger. I go back to when we had a big event, one of the Rivals events. We're trying to get all the Georgia guys together just to do a photo. Not Georgia football players, but guys from the Peach State.
I do remember that.
We have a ton of guys. They're all going to different schools, but Georgia had, 16, 17? It's only 107 guys at this event.
Trevor Lawrence, Jaden Hunter, Justin Fields was there, Jamari was there. I mean, it was everybody.
Yeah. So you take 107 or 105 of the best players in the nation, and 16 or 17 of them are from the state of Georgia. I'm like, we need to get a picture for Peach State football. And Brenton didn't want to do it. Now, he's done all these other photos, and then everyone's lined up, and he comes and jumps in. He lays down while everybody else is standing up, and so you got to change the thing, and he's holding out his Ohio State thing. Well, look, we get it, dude. You're going to Ohio State, and we understand that. But you can't just smile for – I don't even smile. Just stand for a photograph to represent your state. It's like there's just something there.
Well, and one of the things that I think
then
makes –
you saw –
No, go ahead.
I don't want to say just that, but let's go back to DeAndre Walker having to jump on him. Kirby Smart having to jump on him. Shake your head at me, that thing. DeAndre Walker slapping him on the field in front of 90,000 people.
Hit him in the face.
Yeah, I'm just saying. So we saw the precursors of an attitude that needed correcting, and then you saw it on the field. In other words, crap like that shouldn't make it past practice.
Yeah.
That is a correction that should happen in practice. We've heard a ton of other stories that I can't corroborate. That one I can just say we were there,
Sure.
And then here's ones we've seen on film. I've heard a lot of other things. So to your question, are you surprised? No. Do I think it'll work out? No. If you've watched Last Chance U, you see these guys sometimes get kicked off. You're cut, and then they have a talk and it comes back. So, but again, as of yesterday, he is not on the Georgia football team, and cleared out locker, that sort of stuff.
And I think it's important to remember too, and this is something that is sometimes forgotten about Brenton, is he was a very close friend of Justin Fields.
Yes.
And that was obviously when that whole situation went down, he transferred. There was some speculation about how that might affect Brenton. I think that was one of the key reasons he ended up being here. But the fact of the matter is that 2018 class, number one in the nation, down 2 5-stars and Luke Ford already.
Was Luke the number one tight end?
He was, but
so
he was
he's
not
a 5-star. So you get your number one tight end and two fantastic players. It hurts you, but again, that's why you stock up. People say, "Well, how many 5-stars do you need?" All of them.
Yeah, as many as you can get.
and you need highly ranked 4-stars. You need highly ranked 3-stars. It's so that does kind of hurt it, but you hate for Luke, to have to leave due to illness in the family.
You get it for Justin, I think.
You get it for Justin's like, hey, I see the writing on the wall. I went into a head-to-head quarterback competition. I didn't make it. I can go somewhere else and play.
Yeah.
He's eligible right off the bat. It would not surprise me if you hear a story that this was a mutually agreed upon departure, that Brenton Cox could transfer to another school and be immediately eligible, there is an NCAA clause. Georgia would have to agree to this, which basically says if you were recruited over and you left because of a situation out of your control, i.e. you weren't good enough, you got recruited. Now, if you're kicked off for a disciplinary issue, that's in a student's control. That doesn't count. If you're kicked off for academics, that is in your control. You are not allowed to apply for this NCAA exemption based on those two things. It can't be academic. It can't be disciplinary. But if you are like, look, I can't play here. This is beyond my control. The coaches are picking other people. I'm going to transfer. The school that he transfers to can put in for an exemption. The player signs it. The school that he left basically has to say, yeah, it's basically called the runoff clause. You know.
Do you think that played a role in this? The depth chart, the guys who were coming in, who were
I don't know, because we saw this is a guy last year. He played in 13 out of 14 of Georgia's games. He started the game as a true freshman in a crowded room as an outside linebacker. He is a 5-star. He is a talent. A lot of people saying he wasn't that good. You people are wrong. He is good.
Oh, he's great.
He's fantastic. He's one of the best players I had out there. Don't get it twisted just because he had a bad attitude. There are a lot of football players don't have great attitudes. You watch them hold out of camp all the damn time. So don't get all bent out of shape. Point being, he is very talented. A lot of people, he was recruited over. Yes, you have some other guys in the room, but
every single player on that roster, they're trying to recruit over. Period. Yeah. Point blank.
So I don't know that happened. Did it affect Brenton? Maybe.
I think, the opportunity to get in there, see a guy like Nolan Smith, another true freshman, come in this year and be able to make the impact that he has and garner the praise that he has. Jermaine Johnson, obviously, like we said. And then, you've got all this competition going on. I'm not saying he didn't want to compete, but I'm sure that there was a feeling of, man, there's maybe a better opportunity.
Exactly. And you pop off to a coach, and the coach is at that position. In other words, Charlie Warner could probably smart off and he would get kicked off the team because they need him.
Well, he's so scary.
But when you have a situation where you're rolling 9 deep at that spot, you're like, okay, we're 9 deep. We only got room for 2 at a time. If you pop off, you don't get to. The consequence. And again, I'm not saying the coaches, play favorites. I'm just saying that it's a situation where don't pop off when there's some great guys behind you. And so we don't know what happened there. In other words, so I'm not surprised.
Best wishes to Brenton.
Exactly.
I hope that he finds a good home for himself. Yeah. I hope that he succeeds. Like I said, a tremendous player, great guy to watch. A kid who, he looks destined for the league with his makeup and the ability that he possesses. So.
I'm sure we got some other questions, but
we've got a bunch.
I want to talk real quick about YourPie. If you are looking for a great business opportunity, I want you to call our friends out at YourPie Franchising. Open a YourPie franchise. It won't be long before they have over 100 stores. Remember, the first one started here in Athens, about 0.2 of a mile from where we're sitting. The folks out at YourPie, they make the franchising as easy as possible. Eat there, don't get me wrong, but if you're looking in a great in a business environment like we have right now, nothing does better right now than a YourPie. So go when you get a chance. I want you to reach out to Drew French, reach out to Natalie French, say, hey, I want to open a YourPie franchise, and they will take care of you. They're great folks out there.
All right. Let's hop into some of these questions because, like I said, we got them stacking up here like cordwood. I think this is Regulator 450. He's kind of got the abbreviated bit on the board. He says, does the loss of Brenton Cox make Georgia focus a little more on recruiting another outside linebacker for this class? I'm going to say no, because I think that you were already zeroed in on a guy in Jordan Birch who could play that similar role. So it's not like you're going to up the ante all of a sudden and pursue him even harder. Georgia's going full board at that kid. They want him a part of this class. So does Clemson. So does South Carolina. But I don't see it as a situation where that ends up affecting how I don't see them going beyond Birch, to be honest with you. I think that they're comfortable with the guys they got. You got Mikael Sherman, who's a guy who can play inside or out. And I think you got a couple of guys like that on the roster as well. Some people were asking about, do you see possibly Quay Walker or maybe even a guy like Ryan Treble-Davis playing in the outside spot? That wouldn't surprise me. I think that it's a possibility. Now, will it happen? I don't know if I'm going to go that far just yet, but I think that you've got guys who are versatile enough to play those spots. I don't see a situation where it's a huge need for Georgia right off the bat. Maybe if Jermaine Johnson, has a great year and you see the writing on the wall that he's going out for he's going to do 1 year and be gone. Maybe you step it back up, but like I said, I just don't see them moving that hard on it right now.
In at that level?
Right.
So it's not like, there's another 5-star outside linebacker that we, haven't seen them recruiting that now they're going to start reaching out to that guy. And it's possible. I just don't see it. I think what it does, it opens up a spot. Now they're like, hey, we're going to take 5 offensive linemen in this group. Maybe they were taking one spot away from, say, a wide receiver or one spot away from defensive back to get that 5th offensive lineman. And now they're like, okay, well, we got this scholarship opened up and they got it. So
this was a good one from OU Kirby Smart. He says, how much does the success of Zamir White this year affect the recruitment of Zach Evans? And a lot of people are asking me about Zach Evans. He says a lot of people want to know who's going to be the second back in this class. Tank Bigsby said to commit Friday night. Do not like Georgia's chances there. I put in my future cast. I think he's going to Auburn. That's my feeling.
So Georgia will face him then.
Yeah, they will face him, and you can bet that he's going to be ready to go when that matchup comes. I think so. Because listen, I don't think it's any secret that like I've said this many times on this podcast, that's been a hot and cold relationship throughout. Georgia has pursued heavily at times. They've pulled back at times. They've pursued heavily, pulled back. And it's been a yo-yo, really. And so I think that, with him committing when he is, coming right off of that Auburn visit, I think he's got a feeling of, hey, this is what it is. Now, what does that mean for Georgia and their recruiting this year? Zach Evans, I think he's very much in focus. Do I think that Georgia has a chance? Yes, I do. I don't like their chance necessarily. I think that it's going to be tough to pull that kid, as I've said before, out of the state of Texas. But I've spoken to people who do feel confident that Georgia can get that done. If they could, it'd be a huge pull. I get it. You've got
I actually like their chances of flipping another running back that's committed elsewhere first.
I mean, Marshawn Lloyd, I think, is a guy that you keep circled on your list, certainly. But I think that –
who's the one going to Miami?
Don Chaney. Now, he's out of Miami, so that could be tough. But it's happened before.
Georgia's pulling kids out of Miami left and right.
But let's get on this question. He says, how much does the success of Zamir White affect that recruitment? I think it affects it in a very large way. I think that if you've got a clear indication that Zamir White is ready to go this year, he's feeding the beast, and then all of a sudden you can see DeAndre Swift move on to the league, and he becomes the guy in focus next year, I think that would be tough to pull 2 5-star backs with that situation.
Do you want to be the 4th 5-star back on the roster?
Right.
After James Cook, Zamir White, Kendall Milton, are you – and don't get me wrong, some guys do this. I always point out to Alvin Kamara. If you remember, Alabama took 4 running backs in one class. He was the 4th, and they're like, well, you're going to be 4th on the depth chart. He didn't see himself as being 4th.
No, right.
He's like, I'm the best one. And I think out of that group he may be. But point being, it was he's like, when he looked at Alti Tenpenny, he's like, yeah, I'm better than him. So maybe Evans is like –
and to be fair, he was, except he was just never utilized that way. And
but just the point being is all of a sudden, Evans may be like, I don't care who they got. I'm better than those guys. And Georgia gets him. So
I don't –
but to your point, I agree. I think if you have only so many touches on the offense, and if – Zeus comes out and has a huge year, Evans is like, I got so many other options.
Yeah, you've got if you get a clear alpha out of him, then you got James Cook, who's Swiss Army knife, can do a little bit of it all. Kenny McIntosh, who I think can bring the hammer, put his head down. And then you got Kendall Milton, who's going to be able to put another spin on it. Like you said, I think that there are just other opportunities that would be more appealing in that regard. Sierra the Dog wants to know, with only a couple practices in, what would be your early prediction on which of these freshman D linemen will make the most impact this season? Walker, Logue, Norton, or Mitchell?
Well, first I want to say Walker, just because you just look at him and you're like, yeah, he's going to do it. But right now, I might think Logue.
I told you.
You always tell me.
Logue. Listen, they just don't.
For the body frame, because
that's a tough dude to stop.
Jordan Davis, he's a big boy. And if they're going to do as much rotations as Dan Lanning said, when you need that zero technique going in there, you need that, that nose to go in. I don't, maybe just Julian Rochester, but it would not surprise me to see Zion's big butt get in there and just say, look, these A gaps are closed. Y'all do something else.
Yeah, I agree.
Would not shock me.
Let's see here. I think a lot of us have been sleeping on Ryan Davis coming off injury. This is from Pine Tree.
Yes, we have.
One. He says, which other true freshman are we sleeping on that we shouldn't be? I mentioned Micaiah Tongue as a guy that I think that you should watch out for. I think that Micaiah is a kid who will ingratiate himself into that rotation at in the special teams. I think that he will become a part of that very early on. He's a willing striker, played defense in high school, and is a guy who's a very physical receiver too. So he's going to get out there and block. He's going to do a lot of the things that this coaching staff values very highly.
But I was talking with my son last night about arguing. So the first thing you got to do in an argument is define the terms. So what constitutes sleeping on this guy?
Yeah.
Because right now, maybe or is it the guy we're not talking about? Because I want to say, well, maybe Tariq Stevenson. But that was a very highly rated guy. So it's like, are we sleeping on him? Dominic Blaylock. I hear great things about Dominic Blaylock. Well, can we mention him as a sleeper, even though he's also a very highly rated guy? So I don't know which of those you can count on, but those to me are guys that have the possibility at their positions to get in pretty quickly due to the rotation. The wide receiver room is pretty wide open. I could see a situation where Dom Blaylock gets in there and does some things, and I think that especially some of these early games against inferior opponents, you're not going to leave Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell out there into the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we'll see maybe DJ Daniel and Tariq Stevenson out there playing cornerback. And as Dan Lanning said, Tariq Stevenson is a ball player. He is a playmaker. He says we got a good football player in this kid. So, again, but he was really highly rated. So or is he a sleeper? I don't know. So sorry, Pine Tree. I don't know what constitutes sleeping on a guy. But we haven't been talking about him a whole lot. So to me, maybe we are sleeping on him.
Elko Dog says, Kirby seems to pick on a certain player each year, a couple certain players. He says Richard LeCount was one of those guys.
He was.
Who do you think it is this year? Is there a guy that you look for Kirby to specifically max their potential? I will say right off the bat, I have not noticed him doing that these first couple
either. And we normally
days.
Note that.
The guy that I would think that they would want to get after personally, because I think that they're really high on his ability, especially based on what Lanning said, is Tyreek Stevenson. He said you get to watch this kid out there and you say, holy moly, we got a football player.
It is usually a defensive back that he chews out.
Yeah.
Because we talk about, Kirby's foundation principles are win in the trenches, but his baby is a secondary.
Yeah.
And you got to run his secondary the way you want it to. That's why you've seen, no matter how good the secondary guy was, place a foot wrong and Kirby calls you out loud and hell in public. Talk about how guys need to step up, they need to get their heads right, stuff like that. In a press conference, he'll call them out. So I agree with that assessment. I can think Tariq. I think it might also be one of his star guys because that's such a pivotal role
in this defense. Absolutely.
So if Devot, who's always talking smack or something. If he does something wrong, Kirby's going to let him have it. Same with Mark Webb, although it's tough to yell at Mark because he's such a nice guy. Tariq might be there too, but I could definitely see. My guess, if when we're not there, if any of those guys in the secondary puts a foot wrong, he is going to be all over them.
Yeah.
To bring out their potential. Because if the secondary is working and you're able to bring up other guys, if the front seven doesn't have to worry about the back end, there's so much more you can do.
Chad Carson over here on the Facebook page, he says, I've read a quote from a fellow linebacker who said Nakobe Dean will be another Roquan Smith.
I told you that. You didn't read that quote. I told you that last week on the show.
Do you think that he has that kind of potential and talent?
No, I'm not answering that question because you read it somewhere when I told you that. No, I told you that story last week. Do I think he has that talent? I'm never going to come out and compare anybody to him until we see them play.
Yeah.
Does he have that potential? Yes.
Does he have the hype around him? Yes.
Yes. Again, these are people on the team saying this. It's not recruiting analysts, publishers at UGA Sports, coach speak, trainers, medical personnel, water boys, water girls. This are actual football players saying, hey, I didn't think I was going to play with a guy with the talent of Roquan Smith, but now we have one in Nakobe Dean. So that is somebody on the football team that said that. And some other guys have just raved about him. Coach Lanning went on at length yesterday about how smart he is, wanting his stuff. If you combine so he has the football smarts. He has the academic smarts. A lot of guys are very bright but can't do it. They don't have the physical ability. That's why sometimes great football players are terrible coaches.
Yeah.
Because they could do it themselves. And there's like, hey, jump up and knock that ball down, 12 feet in the air.
Right.
Well, I can't do that, But, like I always think, people want Champ Bailey to come back and be a coach. I'm like, I don't know that Champ could be. He may be a great coach, but there's some stuff Champ could do physically that other people can't do.
Right. He doesn't know how to tell you how to do that.
Well, run this guy down before he gets there.
So you're going to play 100 plays, and
and you're going to
what?
And you're going to be able to jump, 52 inches off the ground and knock a ball down before it gets there. High point it,
Yeah.
So you're like, point being, does he have the physical skills? He's not a huge body. He's gotten a little bit bigger, but he does have the speed. So he's going to be able to identify the play early, which is what Roquan did fantastically. He has the speed to get there. The last thing I need to see is, can he make that tackle like Roquan did?
Yeah.
How many missed tackles does Roquan have?
Very few.
That's my point. And we've seen, and I go back to Tay Crowder maybe year before last. Tay had the smarts to get there, had the speed to get there, but missed some tackles. And that hurt Georgia.
I agree.
Now he's making towards the end of the season, he was a much more sure tackler. So you had that ability. Now, of course, he's not
the guy
fast.
who's editing my stuff.
Yeah.
Friend.
That's
Chad
why we
says.
have Grammarly.
Chad says, "Sorry, Roddy. I thought I read it. At least it shows I'm listening every week."
Yes, thank you, Chad. If you're listening, I want you folks to come down to Champy's here and get their 3-piece dark chicken
with the coleslaw and the beans. The beans, the best in town. Far and above. Best chicken, obviously. I mean, that's no question. But you don't necessarily think maybe about a chicken joint having great sides as well. They knock those out of the park.
I eat the coleslaw here, and I don't eat coleslaw anywhere else. And right now, if you get a chance, come down here and have the fried jalapenos. They slice them here. They make them. They're phenomenal. This is what we're going to eat when the show's over. So we need to wrap this up. Now, I do want to give a quick shout-out to Aaron Overhead Doors. This is the company that will give you a 10% discount on the services they provide to you if you're a Georgia fan. Now, Ryan Lucia and the folks out there, just the best in customer service you'll ever see. There's no reason not to use them if you need your garage door fixed. You need your garage door opener fixed. You want to integrate the garage door opener with the little buttons in your car visor. You wouldn't know about that. Oh, wait, does your new vehicle have that?
No, and I don't have a garage at my house.
Well, I'm just saying. I know you had a...
you pay me penance. So
well, I was going to say, if you had one of those, then I was going to cut your pay because I was paying you too much. So, on the visor, you have little buttons. You push a button, and it opens your garage door. You don't have to have the giant freaking connector thing there. So they can do that for you. They can... If you have just a solid wall garage door, you can actually have the one they'll put windows in it.
Yeah.
Take out one of the sections, put a different one in there. They can do anything you want.
If you can dream it, they can make it happen.
Seriously, and they do some great custom work. So if you get a chance, check out Aaron Overhead Doors. They're as close to 5-star ratings as you can get. Over 500 reviews and like 5.97, something like that. So somewhere along the lines, someone gave them a 4.5 or something, and it messed up that perfect rating, but they're as close to perfect as is possible for any business to get. So a big shout out to Ryan Lucia and Aaron Overhead Doors for being a sponsor of our show and the website. So thanks to them.
678-960-3360. How you can get in touch.
Oh, wow. Nice voice over there, radio guy.
Chris Pryor says, go Dogs all the way out in San Diego, California. Woo-hoo. Thanks for tuning in, Chris. Man, that's awesome, brother.
Hey, thanks for getting up early.
Yeah, no doubt. We're already drinking beer. Okay, so a couple of last questions here I want to get to. A lot of people asking about Lawrence Cager. Do you think he can
Larry,
yeah. Do you think he can be a surprise? Pine Tree on the board wants to know plus or minus 30 catches for Cager this year. One guy said, do you think he can be a surprise breakout star? He said, reminds me a little bit of Fred Gibson. which I thought was a very interesting comparison. Let's do the plus.
He's bigger than Fred.
Let's do the over-under.
Physically. I'll go under just because I don't know if anybody's going to have 30 catches.
Yeah, I think that's a lot in this. Yeah. I mean, you've got a lot of mouths to feed. You got a lot of guys who are going to be rotating in and out.
And you're going to run the ball a damn lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're going to run the damn ball, as they say. I just don't see it. And, again, that's not saying that he's not capable of it.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think Cager can or will lead the team in receiving yards?
Ooh. That's a good one. I'm going to say no, simply because I think Demetrius Robertson will.
I can understand that.
Which is weird coming from the slot. That's not a,
Yeah, but you those explosive plays, you get those chunks.
Yeah.
And
they were working, and I'd forgotten the name of that route, the zig route. I couldn't, last night I was like, what? I know the name of this route. I couldn't think of it. They run up 5 yards. They cut inside for 5, and they go straight out on the exact same line. And, all of a sudden the guy covering him in the slot thinks they're cutting inside on a slant. He tries to get inside of them, and they go to the outside. Now they're out in that open space between the hash marks and the numbers, and you give it to Demetrius Robertson there. It's a 17-yard pickup.
Just let him glide.
If you can bring him down. So I like his chances of being, again, a slot guy being a lead receiver is kind of.
It's tough. It's tough to do from there.
But that's good saying that he stays there. So
Stanhope Ligon says New Jersey here, watching New Jersey. Woo-hoo. Luis Moctezuma says go Dogs from Chicago, Illinois. Man, had a great time up there for that Notre Dame game. And Chuck Ward, obviously, he's checking in from Texas. He says Ella.
Let's call him Texas Chuck.
Texas, I like that.
Yeah, Texas. Last but not least, you folks are going to be coming into town in about 4 weeks.
Roughly.
Well, 4 weeks is the
Murray
game,
State.
And then right after that's Murray State.
Yep.
So 4.5, close to 5 weeks. When you come into town for that Murray State game, I want you guys to stop by Academia Brewing Company. The best beer you'll get in town. And I know that's almost blasphemy to say with all the great breweries that are in town, but there's so many different options when you go to Academia. They're going to give you a list this long and, of beers that they've made.
Yep.
This is not like, oh, yeah, we made these 4, and then we have others from – and they will have beers from – they do a lot in partnerships with their breweries in town and other microbreweries.
That's what I think is so cool. You can go out there.
They're not fighting those guys.
If you want an opportunity to sample all the best beer in Athens, Georgia, Academia is the spot to do that because they're carrying not only their great world-class beer, but they're carrying Creature Comforts. They've got Southern Brewing. They've got Terrapin out there. They want to be part of
brewed together.
Absolutely.
So you got that opportunity, but they're going to give you here's the 13 beers that we made. Plus here's the others. You can order a flight, and you get fantastic food. So again, I'm not saying don't go visit Terrapin, don't go visit Southern Brewing, but you can do the brewery tour and you get beer. You can go to Academia.
Get something on your stomach.
And you get some fantastic food. Try the Cerebus sandwich, the 3-headed dog of mythology, guarded the gateway to Hades. They named a sandwich after this dog. It is a 3-meat sandwich. You are going to love the Cerebus sandwich, so we get a chance to go out there. Any other last questions we need to get to?
Dubs GA with a very funny one. He says, do you think George Pickens ultimately ends up wearing number 1 or number 83? That number 1 is a lot of questions around that thing right now between Brenton Cox, Justin Fields. I mean, people are saying, is it cursed? I think that I don't buy into all that, obviously, and you'll see guys wear it again. But do you think that I saw somebody mention? Do you think that they're making Pickens earn it?
Yes. I can tell you for a fact, if he had his preferences right now, he would be wearing number 1. So that number 1 has had some issues, and it still does. Maybe I'll address that in a 3-2-1 column coming up later in the week. Be sure to jump on the last day of the 50% off sale at UGASports.com. The promo code is 50UGA. Be sure to get it today. I will have my insider column, the Georgia 3-2-1 report, later in the week. With some insights from practice that you won't get anywhere else. And again, if you want to get the news a day, an hour, a month, a week, whatever, before you read it anywhere else, you have to sign up for UGASports.com. But aside from the news, come join the community. Come join these hilarious, fantastic, crazy people at UGASports.com. It's the best community you'll ever see. It's very caring, very snarky, very fun group of people to be around with. They make UGA Sports what it is. So come join UGA Sports, and we'll tell you about the curse of number 1. I think Kirby just needs to retire that for a year and let it work itself out.
Shout out Ford Reddy from Raleigh, North Carolina. Tyler McCurry checking in from Charlotte, North Carolina. And Bill Powell checking in from Fleming Island, Florida. I bet it's beautiful down there today. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Shout out to all of our sponsors for sure.
Athens Ford, Aaron Overhead Doors, Your Pie, Academia Brewing Company, Cable East, Robert Wall out in Statham, thank you. 365 Game Day, and, of course, Champies on Baxter Street. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks.
That's it for this episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast. Tune in next week for more Georgia Bulldogs news and notes from Athens.